Welcome, everybody. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, moving on. Approval of the minutes of the CPC, November 5th, 2019. I'll entertain a motion.
We are passing that till next meeting.
We're passing that to next meeting. Okay, little house cleaning here for a moment. Deacon's Folly, the application is off the board. So does everybody understand? And there won't be any questions about that. Next thing, did you folks get the blast on protocol that Jan sent out?
Yes.
Did everybody get it?
Yes.
All the agendas and everything, I'm not sure I got.
Would you pass that down, please,
Yeah.
for me?
Oh, yes, I did get that.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So we all now understand the protocol. Okay, moving on. OS 9, restoration and rehabilitation of town-owned conservation lands. Young lady, would you please give us your name and,
Of course I will. I'm Amy Usowski. I'm the Conservation Administrator and the applicant for this application. I'm requesting from the Community Preservation Committee that you support the request to town meeting for $20,000 of funding from the open section of the CPA funds. And this has been supported by the Selectmen and the Conservation Commission, this request. This would be for land acquired with CPA funding only. I have vetted those. They are extensive, and many of our large conservation areas, such as the Bell's Neck Conservation Area, Island Pond Conservation Area, Thompson's Field, and many others, have lands that were purchased with CPA funding. The town just under 1,000 acres of conservation land, not Selectmen land, not Harwich Conservation Trust land, just under 1,000 acres of land that is under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, of which I am the staff person too. That's a lot of property to manage. The local comprehensive plan speaks to the need to actively manage the land that the town owns efficiently. The open space and recreation plan for the town highlights the need to manage land as well. And a principal objective of that plan is to curb the inappropriate use of conservation lands, such as off-road usage, dumping, and vandalism. Town meeting authorized funds to be spent to purchase many of the lands that we have. And now these lands are in real need of restoration and rehabilitation. Some examples of what needs to be improved on. Improved public access points. There needs to be improvement to public access points. They need to be rehabilitated. Split rail fence, boulders, plantings, etc. Gates and fencing purchased to be installed to keep unauthorized uses at bay and help keep our open spaces natural. We could even go as far as to use additional trail cameras to curb dumping and other unauthorized uses on our lands. I think when the townspeople authorized the use of CPA funding to purchase these properties, the expectation was for the town to manage them. The budget that the Conservation Department has annually for land management is $4,000. Not nearly enough to do the work that we need to do. I'm asking the CPC to support this effort by recommending that town meeting grant the use of CPA funds to help rehabilitate these passive recreational areas.
Nice job.
And I do have hard copies of the amendment that I passed in a couple weeks ago. If anybody wants a hard copy of the application and the little cover letter, I have 3 or 4 of them. Does anybody want one?
I'll always take your copies.
Okay. It's everything that was in the packet that you got.
okay, we're gonna open it up to questions by the board. We're gonna start with John.
Okay, well, I'll start with a comment. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, and I've been a member for, what, a year and a half or something like that. And I've got to say that I was surprised. I have been surprised in the various field trips I've taken with Amy and others and looking at some of the property that belongs to the town of Harwich and some of the challenges that Amy has, or we have really, in dealing with misuse of the property. So I think this is a very important thing. I guess what actually constitutes an appropriate use of CPA funds? Because in your revision, you restricted, I think your language is, you restricted your request to rehabilitation of open space. But there's a distinction in the Community Preservation Act between rehabilitation and restoration of open space that has been used, that has been purchased with CPA funds, and acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space without the qualification that the open space has been acquired with CPA funds. So my question about this, and it's for you, Amy, and the rest of the committee, is the Act says specifically that funds can be used for preservation of open space, and by my lights, what you're asking for the funds for qualifies as preservation of any open space, not just open space purchased with CPA funds.
That's correct.
So my suggestion is it doesn't really need to be
Okay.
restricted quite in the way you're saying that.
I don't remember who brought it to my attention, but it was brought to my attention that it might only be able to be parcels that were purchased with CPA funds, and I figured, I mean, that's not necessarily for me to decide as to how you might want to uphold your charge, so.
Well,
Not
it
to
fits-
pass it
does
back
fit
on
the
you.
criteria. So, Donna,
I actually went and looked at the law and took a couple of key pieces out. And the law says you can only rehabilitate. Rehabilitate's the key word if acquired with CPA funds. Preservation is defined as the protection of real or personal property from injury, harm, or destruction. Maintenance is defined as incidental repairs which neither materially add to the value of the property nor appreciably prolong the property's life, but keep the property in a condition of fitness, efficiency, or readiness. And capital improvements are defined as the reconstruction or alteration that adds to the, prolongs the life, and is permanently affixed or installed, which would be fencing, for instance. So, I mean, I do think if it's rehabilitation, it is restricted to that were purchased with CPA funds. I think many of the things you're asking fall under either preservation or capital improvements.
Okay.
And I did have a couple of questions. With the $1,000, do you have like some kind of spreadsheet that shows the locations, what you intend to do at each location, and what the approximate cost of it is?
That will be something that an upcoming Conservation Commission meeting will be setting priorities list. I have a list that I've generated, but have not yet shared it with the commission. And that will be upcoming soon. The commission has spoken at length about, you know, about which areas they feel need the most rehabilitation. Have a list that's been, or priorities list that's necessarily been approved just yet.
Okay, I think that would be helpful to know the cost of the things that you're intending to do. Who will the work be done by? So the $20,000 gonna be done in-house? Is it a combination?
It could be a combination, depending, and that's why everything is still a little bit open-ended. A lot of the work could be done either by myself, the commission, town volunteers, or the highway department. The DPW is always very helpful with installing fencing in the past for us, making parking areas better, things like that. So that hasn't, to the extent that things can be done in-house, they will be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's no anticipation, there's no engineering services, no planning, things like that. It's really, a lot of it's gonna be replacement of existing things that are in a dilapidated state, and then working towards potentially closing off some areas where we've seen illicit, no illegal activities, and we want that area to renaturalize.
And what do you typically spend the $4,000 that you have within your budget for land management on?
It's anything from tools to, we have, a lot of times we cannot afford out of our other budgets for things like trainings for the commissioners. We have a very small area there, a small amount there that will come out of there. Buying trash bags, honestly, for use of at our conservation areas, and so the individual who takes care of those areas on his own doesn't have to take that out of his own pocket all the time. It's a lot of tool use, training, field guides, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, is that a request for,
If
in order to make that process complete for you?
Yes, if the Conservation Commission's gonna take this up and prioritize some of the work, I think that would be helpful to everyone here.
Okay, I'll follow up on
Okay.
that request for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
John, was there anything else?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Didn't mean to cut you off there. Robert?
My question was along the lines of the priority,
Okay.
which has already been answered, and through the chair is going to request a list of
Absolutely.
priorities.
Okay.
I'll make sure that gets on a very upcoming agenda with the commission.
Okay. Harry?
So my comments were addressed by Donna.
Trying to hit it on there.
And frankly, I agree with Donna's assessment. The rehabilitation, if you are rehabilitating, it has to be with CPA-acquired land.
Okay.
But I think it ultimately is gonna come down to when we see that list.
Okay.
That list is gonna have to show us that you're preserving and not just doing general maintenance, because I think general maintenance falls under the support category that isn't something that we can support with CPA
Understood.
funds. So, I think that list will
Okay.
help. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Joe?
All questions have been answered. I'm all set. Thank you.
James?
I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission, so I'm familiar with this proposal. So what the problem is that some of the land is really being abused by ATVs dumping large bonfires and whatnot, and also just outright encroachment by abutters, treating the land as their own, parking vehicles, creating roads, and it's pretty significant. It's kind of surprising. So, and looking at that, we're like, well, we need to install a gate here, we need some fencing here, maybe some signage here, a combination of boulders and a gate here to really address these. And certain areas like in Robbins Pond, it's pretty significant. You have to have some pretty big boulders. People will get out there with four-wheel drive trucks and actually, rip out minor fencing and gates. So we need, steel gate, large boulders. Some things have happened there that there's been some fires that have spread to, essentially forest fires. A lot of dumping. There's been, I know, a large number of police calls there, some fire calls. So I think it certainly does fall under the category of preservation. I mean, we're literally trying to preserve the land from being damaged and degraded, which it actively is right now. So it's a very much needed request. And unfortunately, the way things are in town, we have, like Amy says, a $4,000 budget to maintain 1,000 acres of land. I think most people have that type of budget to maintain a half acre, or many do anyway. So it's, I'm supportive of the request.
Are you all set?
Yep.
Kim?
And it's a pretty straightforward application. I think most everybody's gone through. My question was also sort of a project scope and rough estimate of, you know, what needed to be done. So I think we've already hit that on the head, so I'm all set.
Okay. Well, we posted, I believe, today our next agenda, which is for next week. So this could go on for the first meeting in December with the Conservation Commission, which is the first Wednesday in December. December 2nd, but that would be too, like the day after, probably wouldn't be enough time to,
Second is a Monday,
is it?
yeah.
Oh,
Our
Yeah.
third is
Yeah.
a Tuesday.
And Tuesday
We're
would be
having
the
a freak
3rd.
meeting on the 3rd, which is
Right.
a Tuesday.
oh, then I'm sorry, I got my days wrong, we're the 4th, so it would have to be, if you wanted an update.
Well,
Yeah, we
It
could
may
do that.
not, I mean, we'll have discussion and start creating priorities list.
Okay. Could you send me a blast,
I will,
and then I'll distribute it?
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Next, Pleasant Bay Community Boating Accessible Dock Project.
Just curious.
Thought about the environmental police.
It's their job to maintain all that stuff, so.
Should talk to Amy about that.
Thank you.
I got one.
I'll need,
I was in the back. She needs a few more, though.
yeah. I have to run around like a little fairy and deposit these other locations.
Thank you.
James, did you get mine?
You got one?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right, yes. Very much.
You have the floor, sir. Could
Thank
you
you.
identify yourselves, please?
Sure. I am Ted Bayless. I'm the president of the board of directors of Pleasant Bay Community Boating. On my right is Rick Paris, who is also a board member of Pleasant Bay Community Boating, has been instrumental on this project. And to his right is Charlie Sumner, who used to be our executive director, but he just retired last year, but he was involved in the initial stages of this dock and has been very much involved in the project throughout the whole process, up through his retirement, and remains involved now as a volunteer. And in the back is the shy guy, Paul Ronte, who is also on our board. You might get the feeling, understanding here, we're totally a volunteer operation, except for a couple of very small staff. Paul's also a board member, and he's been in charge of putting together this whole Community Preservation Act funding application. So if there's any technical questions on the application, he's our guy. So we're here to seek CPC funding for handicapped accessible drop-off area, walkway, permanent pier, seasonal gangway and float, and to replace the small seasonal residential dock that currently exists on our property but is inadequate for our purposes. I brought a plan and a rendering. I could just take a minute and walk you through if that would be helpful. Do you all know where we are on Route 28, where the towns of Harwich, Harwich, Orleans, and Brewster all come together? So this is the plan, and I should come around this side. So Route 28 is here, the bay is here, Chatham's here, Orleans is down here, and Brewster is like right here. So what we're going to do, as part of this project includes, is excavating this entire area to create an ADA drop-off with a vegetated island to protect the people who are being dropped off from the highway. And then an ADA-compliant walkway that comes down along the drop-off area, along the boathouse, and then meets this permanent pier.
Could you hold on for 1 second, please?
Need to get you on a mic,
Oh,
so the folks at home can hear you.
oh, okay. How do I do that? Just hold it?
Yeah, just hold it.
Oh. Okay.
We're gonna reel you in now.
That's my job. Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
So, do I need to repeat that, or?
If you don't mind, they didn't hear it.
Okay. So, over here is Route 28, Chatham, Orleans, handicap accessible drop-off area with a vegetated island to protect the people being dropped off from the highway. Handicapped accessible walkway that meets a permanent pier, which is a 5-foot wide permanent pier that will be there 12 months out of the year. It won't be brought out of the water like a seasonal pier does. That then meets with an 8-foot by 20-foot staging and viewing area. We're going to use it primarily for staging wheelchairs, so the people, when they're going out on a boat or out on any of our other vessels, it's a place to put the wheelchairs. But when it's not being used by wheelchairs, it's certainly a nice place for people to walk down and have a nice view of the bay. It's part of the permanent pier. It'll be there all year round. That meets with a 30-foot aluminum gangway and a 14-foot by 60-foot float that will accommodate all of our vessels and all of our programs and all of our activities. Whoops. And these two little bump outs here are kayak launchers, which will facilitate adaptive paddling, because we have those programs as well as adaptive sailing and boating programs. That's basically the layout of the plan. There's a rendering here. Can you all see it? I should have brought 2 easels so you can see what it'll look like. So just briefly, PBCB's mission is to make boating, marine education, environmental stewardship affordable and accessible to all. As you know, we're a nonprofit. We are open to the entire community. We are our year-round operation with on-the-water programs being offered from March through November, and then off-season programs in the various buildings on our campus when we can't be on the water. We have hundreds of local and visiting families and thousands of individuals participating in our programs. Those programs include sailing, recreational sailing, kayaking, marine education, and environmental stewardship. We also offer free community outreach programs. For instance, we're the home to the Monomoy High School sailing team and provide all the boats for them. We conduct the First Sail program. You've heard of that. That's every June. We take all the 3rd graders from both the Nauset and Monomoy school systems, over 300 kids from 6 different towns, out for their first sail in June, and to teach them a little bit about the bay, a little bit about being on a boat, and a little bit about being on a boat without a we also have a program called BioBlitz, which is in collaboration with the Monomoy High School and the Northeastern University. It's part of the World Oceans Genome Project. We have senior sailing with the Councils on Aging from all towns. We have programs with Monomoy Community Services, Harwich Recreation. We have developmentally impaired sailing and paddling that we do in collaboration with Capabilities. And we have blind and vision impaired sailing and paddling and wounded veteran sailing and paddling. But, you know, we can't offer any of these programs to individuals with mobility disabilities because of the inadequacy of our current dock. And in addition, there are no accessible boating facilities anywhere on Pleasant Bay, none. And there is only 1 or 2 on the entire Cape. As a Harwich resident, I'm proud to say one of them is Saquatucket Harbor, thanks to the great renovation we did there. So this project really creates a way for the disabled community to have access for the bay. as well as access to a wide educational and recreational programs. PBCB has also recently achieved camp certification from the state of Massachusetts, and we're now offering full-day, week-long programs, primarily for the benefit of our local working families who need engaging, healthy educational and recreational activities for their children when school is not in session. And we're also offering after-school programs during the school year. These programs will benefit greatly from this project, from this dock. It'll be larger and safer for the numbers of kids we have, and it'll also enable children with disabilities to participate. You also may have heard that PBCB is in the process of acquiring a 37-foot floating classroom with the help of the Friends of Pleasant Bay. This vessel has a capacity of 31 people and is also handicapped accessible. It's a solar-powered pontoon boat that'll be used for educational and research purposes for both PBCB programs and for programs in collaboration with the local schools and other organizations. And those programs will have a focus on marine education and environmental stewardship and the health of the bay. Of course, our existing dock severely limits the use of this vessel. I mean, our existing float is 12 feet long, and that's a 37-foot boat. So, but the new dock will enable us to get the entire community, including those with disabilities, out onto the bay. Then one final factor this project will also enhance public safety programs, as well as everybody else who is out on the bay from time to time, because it creates emergency access to the bay that does not currently exist. Local public safety officials support it enthusiastically. The supplemental package that we just handed out provides a letter from Chief Pike of Orleans and represents his opinion of him and his colleagues in all 4 towns. We also have numerous letters of support that came in during the permitting process. We didn't bother making 14 copies of all of them, but we can pass them around if you want to see them, or if you do want, if it's helpful to have 14 copies, we'll go make 14 copies and submit them at a later date. But, so just in conclusion, we think that the community benefit for this project is really clear, and we hope that their community preservation funds will be approved to help make it a reality.
Okay. Could I have one of those copies?
Yep.
And we'll make a copy of it and send it through email to the board members. Thank you. You need this back.
No, all yours. Oh, yeah, Paul just wanted me to mention that we are making.
Shy guy.
The shy guy, right. That, if you've looked through either when you do or if you have looked through the application, this is a $250,000 project. And we are requesting $25,000 from each of the 4 CPCs of the towns that we service. As you may know, our campus has, in 3 towns, the northernmost portion is in Orleans, the big house up on the hill with the green trim, that's in Brewster, and the rest of the campus is in Harwich. And of course, we also service the residents of the town of Chatham because they border on the bay as well. So we are applying for assistance from all 4 of those towns. It's, like I say, it's a $250,000 project. We have raised through private donations about $130,000. And we're working on bidding now, so we're hoping that we can get this started in the spring.
Any other members want to speak?
Yes, I'd like to thank you. My name is Richard Paris. I'm an Orleans resident. I apologize for that. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I also have to state that I've known Jan probably since the late 1970s, as my wife's family was very friendly with her aunt, Mrs. Nickerson. When you see me coming, it's very clear that I have a disability. I'm a polio survivor from the early 50s, and I've been walking on these crutches for about 64 years, and my body is, to use the vernacular, crapping out. It's easy to understand that folks like myself with serious disabilities are about 99% of the time excluded from recreational water-based activities on Cape Cod. We're sort of a hidden minority in that sense. Perfect example is the town dock in the on Town Cove, which has lovely dock right there on Town Cove, but there are 5 steps leading up to it. And so for someone like myself, someone in a wheelchair, 5 steps is simply undoable. 2 years ago, Charlie took me for a sail on Friday, and if you don't know the Pleasant Bay Community Boating Campus, it is best described as a mountain goat campus. Fighting my way up there on my crutches and walking across this incredibly rickety, shaky ramp to get out, to get to the float, honestly was one of the scariest experiences of my life. As Charlie can tell you, it was a thrill of a lifetime, and this summer I took a bunch of sailing lessons over at a small adaptive program in Hyannis. But in addition to folks like trouble getting down to the water, I would also urge you to think about, just look at the demographics of Cape Cod. Orleans, as you know, is the oldest average age of any town. Barnstable County is the oldest average age. And folks who are getting older, who have problematic knees, hips, backs, there are many folks who are excluded from the water, including, I'm sure, lots and lots of Harwich residents, because there are, in these towns, no handicapped accessible ADA compliant for folks to get onto floats and piers that would then let them transfer onto a boat and therefore be able to take advantage of what, and no disrespect intended, we disabled folks refer to you folks as tabs, temporarily able-bodied, because all it takes is one slip, one fall, one car accident, and you're going to be on my side of the table. So I
Sir,
think everyone has
Chair
enlightened.
takes objection to that. The chair walks on 2 prostheses.
Then, sir, you have already joined my club, so welcome, and I should have welcomed you earlier. So again, it's not just for disabled folks. It's for Mr. Nixon and so many folks like him who should, in my opinion, be able to access all the recreational opportunities that the Cape has to offer. With that, I'm going to shut up, and thank you very much for allowing me to contribute.
Anyone else?
My name is Charlie Sumner. I was the executive director for Pleasant Bay Community Boating for 3 years. And, Rick talked about me taking him out for his first sail. And I remember when Rick came up to the campus to visit and talked about opportunities, and we didn't have them for him at this time. But we were working on it, and we reeled Rick in, and he's now a volunteer and a great spokesman for us. But it was really one of the most wonderful sails I've ever had in my life, and we kind of cried together afterwards. But that's why I stay involved in Pleasant Bay Community Boating. It's about opportunities for our citizens. And Rick's experience has been magnified thousands of times by many people who come out to our campus. And while sailing is a mainstay of our program, with our floating classroom that has been donated by the Friends of Pleasant Bay, that whole program is about to explode. And that's more opportunities for our citizens to get out in one of the most beautiful places in America. And this dock and pier is going to make that opportunity available for many, many, many of our citizens. Some who don't want to sail, but they want to have other experiences, and we're going to provide those at Pleasant Bay Community Boating. Thank you.
Would the quiet man care to please speak?
Here you go, Paul.
The shy one. I'm really not all that shy. No, I joined, well, I guess I made the mistake about 1.5 years ago of helping with an event that Pleasant Bay Community was doing, and somehow I got reeled in, and I'm now on the board. And so I thought that this would be a terrific opportunity to address the, the 4 neighboring towns with regard to CPC funding to see if we can get them to help us complete this project, because it is extremely important. And, you know, we've got an awful lot of things going on, and this organization just really does a wonderful job at it. So this will help us in those efforts so that we can continue to grow the programming and all the other opportunities that we have at the campus. So thank you for getting me up here so that I could speak.
Okay, I'll open up to the board. Kim?
First, I'll say thank you. It's a very well put together presentation, and looks like something that's very much needed. I don't have a lot of questions. Looks like you've already done quite a bit of significant fundraising, and my only question is, I play devil's advocate in everything. Do you have a contingency plan if one or some of the towns are not able to fund the request? Do you have options of altering or changing or doing more fundraising and getting the remaining amount of money?
Yeah, we can always do more fundraising. We can always do more fundraising. It'll just take more time.
And we are continually fundraising.
Oh, yeah, we are.
That
yeah.
never stops.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Fundraising is me, yeah. Yeah, we're continually fundraising. We have some other donors who have expressed interest in various projects and are looking for help from us as to where they could be looking for guidance from us as to where they could be the biggest help. So we have a very active fundraising committee. Rely on 100% participation by all the towns. It would certainly make it easier and enable us to, get it done sooner, but we have other options if we need them.
That's really all the questions I had. Thank you.
You're all set?
Yes.
Mary?
So my first question for you is, you mentioned your permitting process. Where do you stand in your permitting process, and what do you anticipate for a start date on your project?
Okay. We have the biggest hurdles. We have local Orleans Conservation Commission order of conditions and approval. We have a favorable opinion from the Pleasant Bay Alliance, which I don't know if does everybody know who they are? Mm-hmm. Okay. And we are right now going through the state and federal permitting, which is pretty much complete. They've raised both DEP. Well, DEP has 2 questions that we're working on answering. Army Corps of Engineers had 1 or 2 that we're working on answering. And DOT, because we have to talk to them because of the curb cut, they had a couple of questions. But I feel like we're in the 8th or 9th inning with them. And our John O'Reilly is our engineer, and he's pretty optimistic that we should have the permitting wrapped up by the end of the year.
Okay.
So much so that we are now done some preliminary budgeting and estimating, and gotten some preliminary sort of ballpark quotes, and we're now putting together an RFP to go out and get actual bids from marine contracting companies, hopefully also by the end of the year. Our hope is as soon as the weather breaks, February, March, we'd be able to start on the project.
So that was my second question, was just, you had mentioned that you were in the middle of the bidding process, so you're hoping to have those bids and those numbers by the end of the fourth?
I would hope so, yeah. We're just working on the final RFP now. Matter of fact, we have a meeting tomorrow morning. Oh, yeah, looks like
He moved on you?
Yeah. And yeah, with any luck, we should get the RFP out by the end of by around Thanksgiving, and hopefully get the bids back by the end of the year.
Great, so if you have those numbers back and that information back, that would be helpful from my perspective. Just, we typically have traditionally voted in January so that we can get our articles ready for February in preparation for the May town meeting. So any more firm figures would be helpful, so that,
Okay.
we know that you're hitting your numbers, or
Yeah, we do have some preliminary figures from a couple of marine contractors, which quite frankly are higher than what our internal estimates were. Big surprise, right? But one of them has given us some value engineering suggestions, so we're in the process of considering those and revising the specs to try to get it back down to our budget. So there's no question that it's gonna be every bit of the $250,000.
And when you mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers, you're talking a Chapter 91 license?
Yes.
So that process, that's already in process, so
Oh,
that,
very much so. Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Those are my questions, thank you.
All set?
All set?
Joe?
So I'm very familiar with this thing. I saw it from the very beginning of just a little shack, and now it's just quite a building now that you created, and this thing will really, and what I love is all that you're doing for the schools, and on your own, and then the programs, especially the ADA stuff is really important to me, but to dovetail off of Mary, so hear all those dates. Do you have a projected completion thought process on?
Oh, well, I think that would largely be driven
No.
by the
Yeah.
contractors, but in terms of our hopes is to have it done for the sailing season in 2020.
Really?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big project, but I think were you at the Cape Cod Docks meeting? I think they said 4 to 6 weeks was their time frame for the actual,
Once you get going.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the total budget you have is 250, and that's gonna create that whole dock? And the walkway?
Right,
And the cuts and everything?
right.
It's pretty impressive.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we have an engineer, and we went and talked to some vendors 3 years ago when we started this process, got some preliminary estimates from them, and then we bumped them up significantly because we knew that it was gonna be several years before we did it, and we also recognized that these were, preliminary estimates, not based on a lot of
Sure.
hard specs. And I think there's been a little bit of specification creep as we've gone through the permitting process, things like flow-through decking to let more light through, and, easy docking system because it floats in 2 inches of water. So there's been a lot of design changes to accommodate conservation as well.
You have to dredge?
We don't have to dredge, no.
And how long is the dock itself?
The float itself is 14 feet wide and 60 feet long.
60 feet. So that means that the 31 thing, this classroom is gonna be on there.
Oh, yeah, as well as a whole bunch of 19-foot
Awesome.
boats and 2 kayak launchers. So, yeah, it'll be a busy place.
Be a busy place.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chip.
All set?
Yeah.
John?
I think whatever questions I had have been answered, but I would comment that I'm familiar with the dock that exists there now.
Oh.
And I'm surprised that, I don't think it's just a hazard for people with limited abilities, it's a hazard for anybody. It's like 2x6s strung on 8-foot spans, which bounce back and forth and are full of splinters.
That's
So
right.
it's probably about time that got replaced. And I also, just a disclaimer, several of my grandchildren have done sailing lessons at PBCB before and after the acquisition of the current property, and it's a great program.
Oh, thank you.
So I support what's going on. And the float is 60 feet long. I didn't realize that. So how much further out is that dock than the existing dock?
Actually, very little, about 2 or 3 feet, because what we did is, the current dock has a fixed portion and a small gangway and a small float. It's fixed, but it's not permanent. So what we did is we reduced the length of the permanent pier and increased the length of the float. Because the kayaks, they only need a few inches of water, so it's a little shallow at the inboard end, but that's not a problem for kayaks. So actually, because that was a concern of the Conservation Commission, is we have a license for the existing dock. They didn't want to see this get to be any, they were already concerned about the width and the height, which we needed for ADA compatibility. So they certainly were concerned about it being longer too. So that was the way we achieved that. Because let's face it, the business part of it for us is the float, right? The pier is just a float. So the bigger the float, the more we can accommodate.
So the inshore end of the float is only in a few inches of water at low tide?
No, it's in about a little less than 2 feet of water at low tide, and obviously 6 feet at high tide.
Okay, thank you.
All set.
All set.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna recuse myself from this one.
Fair enough. Robert?
Have you done any statistics on exactly people who have participated in the programs, what towns they do come from?
Well, we have that information. Abby would have that, right, with all the registration. I don't have it handy, but we can provide it if you'd
I
like.
don't know if you've analyzed that to see which towns were collecting or contributing more, or how many in the summer, how many out-of-staters and things like that.
Yeah, certainly we have that information. Have any
I don't have it handy.
sense of that?
We have that. We analyze it every
You
year.
do? Okay,
So we can get that to you within
Yeah.
a few days.
maybe we have that for future.
Sure.
Okay,
Did you make a note?
that's all I have.
Oh, yes, sir. James, are you a member of the board?
Ted is my stepfather.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Moving on.
Well, I want to compliment you on the application. It was really put together. You provided specific financial information, project costs, a budget, a time frame, and some annual statistics of usage. So that was really helpful. Will there be times open to the public, or do you have times when you're open to the public?
Well, we are open all the time to the public. We have a membership model that's not unlike a museum. You can join and be a member, or you can participate on a non-member basis. If you join, you get a break on some of the program fees that are already pretty low. But we also recognize that there was some number of visitors if you're visiting here for a week or two, somehow the membership thing got in the way. People just wanted to rent a boat or go out on the bay or take one lesson. They said they didn't want to have it. So bottom line is we converted to that format. So technically anybody can come and participate in any of our programs at any time without joining as a member. But if they choose to join as a member, then they get a better rate on the programs. We also have talked quite a bit, especially with the public safety people, about, and I guess this came up in CONSCOM too, didn't it? That if there were groups of disabled people who wanted to use the dock and they wanted to use it for some activity that was not related to our activities, we would certainly work with them. I mean, we're all about facilitation and participation. We would just need to control the flow so that they're not coming in when you have, 30 kids on the dock going out to sail on boats, or a bunch of kids in sunfish splashed around the water or something. So for safety reasons, we need to control access, but we're open to everybody.
So any nonprofit could petition for use, or a program, or a school?
Oh, we love collaboration.
Yep.
Do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that we do that now. We have a lot of not-for-profit organizations that use our facilities and participate in our program. Even the Orleans Ponds Coalition.
Right.
We have a lot of free programming. I would say 25% of our program is free to different organizations. But we have a lot of other collaborative organizations that use our campus as well for without charge in almost all cases.
Yeah, Friends of Pleasant Bay have all their meetings there.
Simpson Island Trust.
Simpson Island Trust, Center for Coastal Studies, we do a lot of things with them. And who am I missing? It goes on and on.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And the only reason why they have a prayer of coming in on budget is because they don't have to pay prevailing wage on this project.
Then there's that. Good point.
And if I could, I would just like to point out that we are asking for 25,000, but if the town of Harwich would like to distinguish itself and outpace the other three towns, we would be deeply appreciative.
Love it.
We even give you top billing.
Have you approached the district, Monomoy or Orleans, for funding?
District meaning the school districts?
Yes.
Not-
You're offering educational programs.
Right, so some of the programs that are being developed with the schools, they get grants for those programs, and they will reimburse us for our costs. That's the model we're using for the floating classroom. The teachers go get grants for some sort of marine science or marine education or environmental programs that utilize the floating classrooms. They deliver the program at our facility. They use our floating classroom, and they pay us for the use of that. That's one model.
Quick question in that model, do those grants grow directly to you or to the district?
Those go to the district.
And then are distributed from them to you?
That's right, in that
You
model.
don't have any, okay.
Right. We've just, this year, I mentioned an after-school program, so we've developed that with the Monomoy Middle School. We have a one-day-a-week after-school kids program, which if you're a friend of ours on Facebook, you can see all the videos. It's just a marvelous program. And we're hoping to expand that and turn that into a model for after-school with other schools also. I don't have any idea of how the financing works on all that. That's going to be part of that process as we explore that.
I'd be
But if you-
really interested to see what the schools, what the district contributes itself, not through the grant process, from its own budget.
I have no experience, but if you know, if you do, or if you know anyone who does, we'd certainly welcome a hand.
Okay.
If you could tell us who we should be talking to, would be very appreciative.
Business manager. Do you have scholarships for groups that come in that don't have the ability yet want to use your facility?
Groups or individuals?
Both.
Well, individuals, yeah, I mean, we just don't turn anyone away. You know, it's kind of like the way, we're just gonna find a way to make it work. We do have formalized scholarship programs that people can apply for and all that, but in truth, did you ever turn anybody away?
We've never turned any
Yeah.
applicant away.
Yeah, we just make
Good
it,
answer.
make it work.
Thank you, thank you. I have no more questions. Does the board? Thank you very much for coming in.
What are,
Thank you for your time.
just could you, what are the next steps in this process?
We have to vet a whole bunch of patients.
Yeah,
Then we have a time that we deliberate. In that deliberation process, as I do with all the others, except for the last one, people can come at the beginning of the meeting. You can voice your opinion, what you want to see, where you want to see it go. But after that point, the discussion's with the board and the board only. So, after we vet all those applications, we take in additional information, if it's available, that is request. And then sometime in late January, we start the process of the vote,
okay.
so.
Do you want us to appear at any of those meetings for, answer any additional questions, or?
This, unless one of the board members has asked you a specific question, that will come back in email form, and the blast will go to the entire board, you don't have to be here. If you're curious, this is an open session, you can come and sit and listen,
Okay, great,
so.
thank you.
And you will alert us as to what that particular date or dates are?
It'll be it'll be posted. It'll be on the website.
And that's probably in January, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the information about breakout of participants by town, should I send that to Jan? How should we best get that to you?
Either,
Yeah, send it to Jan.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Rick, what I'll do is
Keep
I'll
up
send,
there.
Rick,
Yeah,
what I'll do is I'll send Ted my email,
perfect.
and then if we can get the numbers from the town participants from Charlie, and I'll make the copies of the PDF, and that was the only one that we had.
That's,
Take this out of here.
This thing, the top too much, Rick, my voice. I was always doing, except for the one I wanted to do something.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'll just put them in the drawer.
Okay, that's fine.
4 copies of this for someone.
Okay, moving on. If I can find my agenda.
Got it?
I have it. Rental Assistant Program. Welcome. Would you please identify yourselves when you get to the microphone?
John Stewart, and this is Tracy Cannon, and we are from the Harwich Housing Authority. We are seeking $200,000 for the continuation of the rental assistance program. We offer a 3-year program to participants where we will offer them up to $350 a month to offset their rents. They need to make less than 80% of the area median income to qualify. And something we want to do different this round is look at childcare costs and deduct that from their gross. If that brings them under the 80%, then they'll qualify.
So I was just going to give you a brief.
You are?
Tracy Cannon. I work for the Harwich Housing Authority as well. And I pretty much run the program. I do all the paperwork, and so I kind of have all the numbers in my head. If there's anything specific that anybody wants, I'm happy to get it, to all of you. I just didn't know what specifics you would want, but it's, this began in 2010, before I was there. And right now we've served, I did the numbers, gone through the program. They do, it's $350 maximum, so we take their gross income and their rent. That's all we've ever used, is just the gross income and their rent. We take 30% of their gross income is what we put into, the category of an affordable rent. And we've never reduced that gross number by anything. And this time around, we've had a lot of need with the families. That just, their gross is one thing, but then when you throw in childcare costs, it just becomes, it's ridiculous. So that's the only thing that we're planning to do differently. The other couple of little details about the program are that they can only do it once. You can't go through it again. You have to live in Harwich, work in Harwich, or have kids in the school system. And so every year we reassess them. And so hopefully what the plan is, and it does happen with the majority of them, their need, hopefully gets a little less each year. Hopefully their incomes have gone up. And sometimes we do it and they no longer are eligible. They're making too much money, which is glorious. That's what we all hope for. But, very often with the rents going up the way they are around here, it isn't always the case. So, it's been a huge, I think it's been a huge success, and it's, it's a
Much needed program.
Hugely needed program to keep people in their homes.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, we'll open it up to the board. Robert?
Okay. How many families do you run out of money and
Yep.
families just can't get the
So
money?
we do, that's exactly what happens, and that's why we come back, then we come back and we basically ask for more. The amount that we're asking for this go-around will serve, if the people were to need, it's sort of a hard call, because you never know, where it's gonna, and if people are gonna need less, as time goes by. But if we were maxing it out, it would serve a minimum of 15 families, the 200,000 over 3 years. So, and then usually it's more than that, because usually people drop off the program for either because they don't need it or they move out of town or whatever happens. So we usually do get a few extra.
So you say it's a 3-year program, so when someone qualifies, they can be on it for 3 years?
Maximum of 3 years.
But then and every year they're reassessed?
Correct.
Okay, so after the 3 years, you can no longer
You
be
can-
on.
And you can't go back on. Yeah.
Okay. And how much, do you know offhand how much you've received from Harwich CPC over the years?
We've had, the total was, since 2010, has been 900. I don't know if it's all come from CPC though, has it?
Some of that,
Yeah.
I think it was I think 6,000 of that was, I think we've done this program 3 times.
Yeah.
3, 6.
It's been 9,
Yeah,
I
it's
added
6,
today,
9.
I did that,
Yeah,
ran that number today, and
900,000.
it was like 928,000 is what's gone through the program. I don't know if that's all CPC though. But it's gotta be pretty,
Yeah, it
a
would
lot
be
of
all
it, most of
CPC.
it, yeah.
Do you handle buy-downs too?
We have in the past,
Yeah.
yes.
But you don't have any
We don't have any right
programs
now, no.
Not currently, no.
No,
So,
fortunately.
given the money and you make that commitment for the 3 years, so you actually do have people that you have to just turn away? Or do you always?
When we run out of money, yes. I have a waiting,
That's what I'm kind of feeling.
yeah, I
So
have a
these are-
waiting list right now. Yep, I have a waiting list of I've got about a dozen people on it.
Okay, so if you're on it and they're 3-year commitment, do you have the money to guarantee for the 3
Yes,
years?
Yes.
yes.
absolutely.
We don't
Yes.
sign anybody up
Yeah,
without
we
the
don't have the
money to
money.
back it
Nope.
up.
Okay,
No.
got it.
Yep.
Do you know how many you have on like
So
a waiting
current,
list?
yep, currently I have 12 people on my Harwich list. But what happens is we don't advertise it much because we don't have any money right now.
Right.
So what will happen is if whatever money we can get, we will, after town meeting, we'll put out a big advertising push
Right.
to let everybody know that we've got it, yeah.
Okay.
And this,
And word spreads really fast,
Yeah.
yeah,
and this money will, at $350 a month, would do 15 families.
right.
for
A
the
minimum
year.
of 15, yeah.
Thank you.
James?
Just to clarify, the Harwich Housing Authority, that's a private nonprofit?
It's a
It's state,
state subsidized, yeah.
State subsidized?
The
Yes.
Department of Housing and Community
yeah, we're a
Development.
state authority.
And are you specific to Harwich, or do you do other towns?
We, the two of us also
We-
also do the Chatham Housing
Yes.
Authority.
Okay.
But they're separate housing authorities.
The Harwich Housing Authority has a management agreement with Chatham. Because Harwich is small, has 12 family units, a group home and some MRVPs. So they asked Chatham if they would manage it. They're run as separate, they have separate budgets and everything else, but
And the authority gets state funding as well?
yes,
to some
the
extent.
authority is, yeah.
And when you say that a family or an individual can only do it once, is there a time limit overall to how long they could be on the program?
3 years is as long as they can be on it.
And then they
Yep.
can't be on it again?
And then they're done, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
One other question, do you know what that number is, the 80% AMI?
Oh, I don't have it on me. It depends on, it goes by
Family
members,
size.
members,
No members in the family.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. And
I think it-
I know off the top of my head, I know that, like, one person is 51.8, I think.
Yeah,
and 2 is 55.3, and
Right.
3 is
58 something.
58 something, yeah. Only because we're just in the middle of doing a lot of stuff right now with that, so.
That's the 80%, or that's the annual median?
That's
That's
the
the
80% of it, of annual, of average.
All right, thank you.
John?
Yeah, so, can you sort of give more details about the funding? Because I know nothing about this, and there aren't any details in the proposal at all. You're asking for $200,000 to cover 3 years. Is that your only source of funding for this?
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
I see. So
Yeah.
if we
And I
weren't
did
to
think, and I
grant this,
apologize,
you-
because it didn't occur to me that, it's just sort of, we've been doing it, since 2010, so then I realized when we got here, there are people that haven't been
But
on the
not
board
really,
and
yeah.
aren't familiar with it, so.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that it's, the limit is 350 and the maximum is 3 years.
And what is the typical rent that $350 is going against?
It can be anything from, depending on if it's one person that's applying, it would go, and we do usually use a reasonable rent. I mean, there's reasonable rents. You can't, we're not gonna give somebody money if they're, one
A beach
person.
house.
One person living on the water. Yeah, you need to be, there's some state guidelines that we follow, that you have to be what we call bedroom appropriate. You can't be one person in a 2-bedroom. You have to maximize the bedrooms, and you have to, you have to have a year lease, and it has to be a legitimate
You have
rent.
to have an annual lease, so
Yes.
people
To be
can't
good, yeah.
come and say they're gonna camp for 3 months in the summer.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Somebody can't come and ask you for support for a winter rental, and they're gonna sleep in a
They-
tent
they
over the
cannot.
summer.
They
So
cannot, no.
No, we have to have a lease, a 1-year lease.
Yes, and we have contracts with the tenant, with the landlord, separate contracts and payment agreements, and
They follow along the lines of the state, this state has a rental assistance program, and we use their templates for the,
Okay, so you're asking for $200,000, and that's an amount that will take you for 3 years, and you wouldn't be coming back and asking for more money for 3 years? Or is
Yes.
this like a rolling thing? Will you come back a year and ask for another 3-year term?
no, it usually, because that money historically has trickled into the 4th year, because people drop out, or they are no longer qualified, so then that money becomes available. So we
I
are,
think it's been on
runs
average
into the
about 4 years, yeah.
So in that 4th year, we come back, so that the money we have now
You
will
won't
be
come
running
back
out.
You won't come back after 3 years? You will, at 3 years, you'll account for your balance?
We come back when we start to be, just when we run low on money. I mean, so it depends on how long it takes to use that 200,000. There's no real way to gauge it, because
Yeah.
I have some people who we give $350 a month to. I have people who get $100 a month. I have people who get $165 a month. It's all, it just depends on their. Some time.
So you have clients, I can use that word, is that the right word, clients?
I usually
People
use
who come-
tenants, but that's because they're
Tenants,
all
okay,
tenants, yeah.
who come to you, but is there a fixed start time, or are you like talking to people? You would start on a 3-year term, say next month, for example.
Not until we
So-
get more money, because we don't have enough money to get us through 3 more. In other words, I don't have enough money in the bank account to cover somebody for 3 years at $350, an extra person. So now I do have people that are gonna continue on for a couple of years that are already on the program. And then I just have this, sort of small group of applications that are waiting, for us to.
So you don't accept an applicant unless you know you already have enough money in the
Exactly.
bank to fund the
Exactly.
entire
Yep.
term.
Yes.
That's exactly
But
right.
you can accept an applicant with that constraint at any time.
We can
Not-
take,
not-
yep,
Yes.
we can take the application anytime.
Yeah.
Yep,
I
yep.
see, okay.
And so we do, and I do. I take them whenever anyone drops them off, and then I add them to my waiting list. You never know. I like to always have a waiting list, because you never know when 1 or 2 people might suddenly not need they just don't need it anymore. We redetermine them annually, and they're making too much money, or they call and say, I'm moving to Yarmouth, or whatever, and then, lo and behold, we have a little extra money. And then we can call somebody on the waiting list.
Okay, thank you.
When's the last time that you came to the town, to the CPC in Harwich, to ask for funding for this?
For this would have been,
Where are we, 2019 now?
yes,
I wrote it down and I forgot it, I'm sorry.
16.
I was just gonna say, I think it was 2016, yep.
Might have been 15, we got the money 16.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're finishing up our third year.
Okay, because I remember the buy-down program with the package that was down in Harwichport.
Mhm.
And that's the last time I remember you folks coming
Okay.
before this board.
We did come for buy down, I believe it was last year, but it wasn't,
Two years ago?
I
2 years ago, yeah, it wasn't, didn't go anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Donna?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So is the money paid directly to the tenant, or is it?
To the landlord.
It's paid to the landlord,
Yes.
okay, great. And how much money do you have on hand right now for this program?
In my actual bank account, I'm at about 32,000, I think.
Okay. And you say it's 4,000 administrative costs. Is that over the life of the 3+
It's,
years?
I think 2,000 administrative cost?
It says,
2%, it was,
yeah, it says 196,000 goes to offset rent.
okay, 4%, yeah.
So I just subtracted that from 200.
Yeah.
So 4,000 is for the life.
For the life of
Yes.
the chunk that we're requesting, yeah.
Okay. And they are redetermined annually?
Annually, yep.
Okay. If they're reevaluated and they're no longer eligible, do they have a certain amount of time before you stop?
I give them 30 days I'll give them 30 days from, if it's mid-month, we don't, we give them a month, a full 30 days minimum
Yep.
notice, yeah.
And do you have an inspection program for the?
We don't for
unit?
this
No.
particular, program. The state does, but we haven't for this one. We haven't really, we haven't really needed it. They've been, a lot of our landlords are the same, or the bigger affordable landlords or whatever, and we've just, never run into trouble thus far with it, so.
And what type of fair market advertising do you do for the program?
The newspaper, we do the Chronicle, the Cape Cod Times, the newspapers, and then we do flyers. Actually, we've been emailing
Yes.
as opposed to hard mailing, so we have a huge database that we email to.
I do think it would be helpful if we could get a few more pieces of information.
Sure, yep.
I think the AMI table would be really helpful
Okay.
for people who are not familiar with what the income limits are
Mhm.
right now.
Mhm.
You mentioned the Harwich Housing Production Plan. I think at least that page that talks about the importance of rental assistance programs.
Okay.
A history of the CPC applications that you have received and what they've been used for. And I would like to see what the application looks like, so
Okay.
Sure.
maybe a
That's easy.
blank application
Yep.
Okay.
would be really helpful.
And can we email those to you and you disperse them, or?
Right.
Okay.
Great.
Very good.
Anything else that anybody would like to see?
Process of,
Oh,
are you all
sorry.
set?
I'm all set, thank you.
Joe?
So I thought I heard you say you served the average of 15 families over 3 years? Is that right?
That's what the 200, this amount, the
Yeah, right,
200,000 would be
right.
about roughly 15, a minimum of 15 families.
Okay. And are there any other rental assistance programs that you manage, maintain?
So we have, we have, we
We
have,
do the same program for Chatham.
we do the same program for Chatham, and then we have the 2 state programs that are the Massachusetts programs.
And how many people does that serve?
We have 21 in Harwich, and that's ongoing. That's quite different in the sense that it's ongoing, it's lifetime. As long as you need it, you always have it.
As long as you qualify.
And there are no limits. So in other words, if somebody, I have amounts that are, was 100 and as high as 1,200. So,
So to Donna's point about, so you advertise this
Yep.
at the appropriate time,
Mhm.
when you have money. So you, do you have, what's your waiting list like?
Right now, I have a dozen on my Harwich list.
Okay, and when
But
you
it's-
finally put this out, will
Yep.
it increase to what kind of number?
Oh, we'll fill it. We'll get 15 people.
I know you'll fill it, but
Yeah.
is the waiting list, once they know the money's there and everyone puts in an application, are there
There would be easily 100 people asking about it. What happens is people won't apply if the list is too long. The homeless prevention up in Orleans will give, they'll be handing out applications to any Harwich resident that comes in, basically. So
Okay.
we could have, I would say the most I've ever had is probably 30 or 40 applications at a time.
And as they come in, it's first come, first serve, you don't do a lottery, right?
No, we do not, no.
Okay.
Everything's date stamped, yeah.
All right, I'm good, thanks.
So, Joe.
Yeah.
Kim?
I am a member of the Housing Authority, and I support this application. The rental assistance program is a fantastic program that is definitely not known enough out there of how good of a program it is. With the high cost of rents here in the Cape and low wages, this program gives people just a little bit of a leg up to be able to, it's hard enough to find a rental on Cape, and staying in the rental with wages sometimes, or something happens, you're pregnant, you can't work. I'm very happy to hear you've got the childcare, that you're putting that in there,
Yeah,
because
that was huge.
having a son that just ended his childcare and on to kindergarten, I know how difficult that makes it to afford rent. So just a couple of things, I just want to say that, it's a great program. And I know that kind of went through its, kind of a little bit piece by piece here, but it is something that requires a year-round lease. It does get paid directly to the landlord. The key thing is it's up to $350, so if somebody starts, mom or dad's home with the kids, maybe they're getting $350 this year, next year they might only be getting $250. So they have to be income qualified, they have to be residents of Harwich, and they do recertify them annually.
Is there a question there?
No, I just wanted to, no, I don't have any questions. It's a great program.
Anybody else? Robert?
Follow-up. So why don't you ask for more money if there's clearly more people that could use it?
Just because the time involved, at this point, we just don't have the time to keep up with any more of that between the two towns. And
So if people come to you, do they first try to qualify the Massachusetts grants?
that's a
and then
whole
this is-
separate waiting list.
Yeah, and there's,
So, no,
yeah.
if a person came to you
Oh, yeah.
and said, do they typically apply for both lists?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, and
Yeah.
which one comes first, or,
Yeah.
obviously the state sounds like it might be a little better, or, no,
Oh,
probably
the
about
state is
same.
much better, but
Yeah.
it's a much longer wait
but there's,
list, too.
yeah, hundreds and hundreds of people on that list.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
you're on the town list and you get on,
Yep.
and you're still on a waiting list for the state,
Yep.
you can switch over to the
Oh,
state?
yes.
Yep, in a perfect world, that was exactly what would happen, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Unfortunately, the wait for the state, is years and years, so
Okay,
it's hard.
thank you.
Anybody else? Donna?
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? So the state program, if you get a rental voucher, it can be used in any town, right?
Statewide.
Anywhere in the state.
Yeah.
They don't allocate certain
Vouchers, if you will. In Harwich, we have 21,
Okay.
and.
But there's no dollar figure attached to those.
Right. It's not,
It's just you
there are
have,
no limits.
you have 11 vouchers, and, yeah, and like Tracy said, we have people who pay, almost $1,200 a month towards their rent, and people that are just 300.
Yeah.
It all depends on their need.
It all
So the
depends on
state allocates you 21 vouchers for the town of Harwich but they can use them.
So
any-
the way it works is it's like housing. They, you apply to the town of, into Harwich Housing Authority, and anybody can, but Harwich residents get a preference, because administered by the Harwich Housing Authority. So you get, like housing, you get an emergency, there's an emergency
Right.
aspect and a,
Right.
and a local preference.
Right. If they move off Cape, then their voucher is transferred to the nearest housing authority, and we get another one to replace it.
Okay.
Are you part of the authority?
Yes, we are the authority.
We are the authority, we're the
You are
housing,
the authority.
we're the
We are
housing authority.
housing
Yep.
authority, yes.
The staff.
It's
You're
really
the staff.
confusing.
Okay.
As opposed to the board, that Kim is a member of the board.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
What is the waiting list like for those, for the state Harwich?
At this point, we have, I think, we were just talking about this today, and I want to say that it's, 700 people,
7D,
700
700.
people
700s.
on the MRVP waiting list. Yeah.
They just went to an online system.
Yes.
Well,
The MRVP
MRVP
is
isn't yet,
not part of
so
that,
it's-
but
It's actually been the MRVP is separating from housing. I mean, they're just sort of different, they've got different rules now and things.
but anyone can apply anywhere
You can apply in any town.
or
if-
everywhere. So that's whether they just send an application to every housing authority. So
Yeah.
we have applications from people who don't even know where we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the nice thing about the town or the CPC
Right.
funded, is that you know they are gonna be
They're gonna be
used
local
by
people.
Harwich residents
Yeah.
in the town of
Absolutely.
Harwich, but.
And it does end up usually, the state stuff does usually end up being local. I mean, just because they're administering them, so
They
they
have a
live
preference
nearby.
locally
And
and all of
they get a
that.
yeah, if I get an opening for a voucher, I go to my homeless local people, emergency local people first.
I think the only other piece of information that would be really helpful would be the average rent, because I know that, that everyone in the world knows how
Yep.
horrible rents are right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, well, we use the HUD, the maximum rents. They do the average every year, so I can
That
send
would
that to
be a
you too.
good piece of information.
Those are all, very, very easy.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mary?
So just one question, if somebody drops off, say it's a person who's, or a family that's getting the 350, and they drop off, if your next applicant in line is somebody getting 350 and you're 3 months into into a 3-year program, that next person isn't necessarily going to be able to get that.
We won't give them the voucher unless we can commit to 3 years at $350. If, sometimes, I'll have an applicant, the next person in line, if perfect day, the next person in line, if I have enough for someone to get, that's a piece, actually, that's an important factor. Once you drop down in your voucher value, you can't go back up. So if somebody drops down, and if I go to an application and I say, well, this person only qualifies for $200, and we have enough money in my calculation, in my budget, I have enough money to cover $250 for 3 years, then I can go ahead and give it to them. But if they need the full 300 and I don't have enough yet, we just keep our fingers crossed and hope.
So I'm thinking of the scenario where, somebody had 350, 3 years in, they move to Yarmouth, they move in with family,
Yep.
something else happens. Your next person on the list needs 350 for 3 years. You're short $1,000, so you're not gonna get that person. Do you jump over that person to go to, if your next person on the list has 200, or do you just,
We wait.
you wait and you hold
We
that
wait
money
for that
until you have?
person, Yep. And it's never happened that
Okay.
that has never been a problem yet for us. I'm sure it's a good question, because if it did come up, we do feel strongly about the next person in line
Okay.
should get, we're just,
And you would never just tell them that we're only guaranteeing you for 2.5 years?
We talked
and
about
give
that
you-
at one,
and
we
give you-
talked about that at one point, and
Give
we
you 3
decided
months, so
not.
we'll give you 3 months if we get additional funding,
No.
but we
Yeah.
can't
We have
guarantee that we
had
have it.
people who have come to us and said, I only need 2 years. I don't need the 3 years. I know my situation is gonna change, but I need the help for 2 years, and we've been able to do that with funds.
Yeah.
So that triggers another follow-up for me. you said you have a balance of $30,000. One person at $350 a month for 36 months is $12,000 or $13,000. So why is there anybody on?
Well, I
your-
have a balance in my account of $32,000.
We have people who are drawing against that.
They're drawing against it currently.
The current bank
Yeah.
account is that much, and
No,
we're
that's
drawing
it,
against.
but yeah, if you had it out in a
Sorry
budget,
for the
that would be a good
confusion.
question, though. That would be,
Well,
yeah.
it'd be nice to have the numbers in front of us so we can
Yes.
figure it
John
out. because-
understands that, his wife does it.
Right? So, yeah, we have two different numbers. We have the actual bank balance, and then I have the balance in my budget, you know, of what, and I do watch that balance in my budget, I watch really carefully, and that's when I go, yay, you know, I'm over 12,600, I can grab somebody else off the list. So, yeah, I watch it like a hawk, hopefully.
Kim, do you have any more questions?
I don't, I think we,
Anybody else from the board? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very
And I'll
much
get-
for
I'll get all
having
that
us.
stuff to you. Yeah, that's easy, easy peasy.
Website.
Yeah, I know, but I wanna,
You always lose your
I know it.
application, I mean, your agenda.
here,
Real quick to the board. We are all advocates for some entity that we, and that's the reason why we're here on this board. We advocate for whatever we are, whatever we represent as an entity, that's what we're supposed to do. But at this time, when these folks are making their presentations, the only thing you should be advocating are the types of questions you need in order to make the process work. I'm not very politically correct when it comes to this stuff, so I'm gonna just lay it out there. The taxpayers are watching these on TV. If you can tell by the questions that are being asked by any board member where the direction of that board member is going. Now, that can change, yes, but it's a general direction, and it's just by observation. It's wrong for us to make statements of encouragement to the people, the applicants that are in front of us, because we're declaring what we're gonna do with our vote. And that shouldn't happen until deliberation. When we hit deliberation, it's have at it. But until that point, please try to restrain yourselves from being overly enthusiastic about the group that's in front of you. And in that blast that went out, the other thing is, there are times when the board members ask questions to the applicant that are not on point. I'm going to ensure that from this point on, to the best of my knowledge, my understanding of what's being said, I'm going to make sure that happens. So, that's that. Moving on. The website, old business. Sir?
Mary had one comment last time. I went and put in the email address at the bottom of the description. The funny thing is about the tool there is they have a contact information thing there, but they have no place for an email address. So I had to just stick it in at the bottom, which is, and it's, I believe, the email address you requested, so
So it's there.
it's there.
Well, we'll find out when these folks send us the blast.
And
So,
so
I mean,
Taking it
just-
to all the rest of the board too.
I think at this point, I have nothing else to really say except anticipating what happens next cycle, which I'm not really thinking about very hard. My thought is more online access, but there's no point in talking about that right now, because we have our plates full with other stuff.
Okay,
Unless, excuse me,
go ahead.
anybody has suggestions for other content that should go on there, please tell me, and I will attempt to.
Are there any suggestions from the board at this point? Okay, we got the message.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. All right, old business, the website has been done, other. Next agenda points. Does anybody want anything put on the agenda for the next meeting? And I will set up with open space and real estate for December 3rd for the joint meeting of both boards, and that will be an executive session as a request from real estate and open space. I talked to John Giorgio, the KP Law today, and he gave me an explanation of how that should be done. So we'll meet here, their group will meet here, we'll open the meeting, and then we'll go into executive sessions with a roll call from us, with a roll call from their board. The other members of the audience will be asked to leave. That will happen first. We'll do our business. When we close the business, we'll roll call both boards again, and then we'll go back, we'll invite people back in for the open session. So is everybody clear how that works?
No. No, I don't, what's the agenda for this? I'm sorry, I feel like I missed a step or
It's an
something.
application, it's an application that's put in by real estate and open space. It's in your, it's one of your applications. I don't even know if I can use the name of the application at this point, so I'm not
There
going
is an
to.
application that needs to be dealt with in executive session, is
Yes,
that what you're saying?
because
Okay,
when it
thank you. All
Is
right.
that enough?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
enough.
fair
I
enough,
just didn't
fair
understand that to start with.
Anything
Jumped
else
over
from
that
the
step.
board?
Jumped over that step.
Nothing else? I
Motion
need
to
a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Boom.